College basketball is back.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into this Locked On College Crossover, Locked On Coogs, Locked On Kansas State. I'm Christian Rauh here at Parker Ainsworth, and college basketball is back. It is going to be an epic season, and for many different reasons for each of the teams. Can Houston find themselves back in the national championship? Can they find themselves as a Big 12 champion again? And then on the flip side, can Kansas State just get themselves to the dance? I mean, way different expectations, but a lot to be excited about on this episode and for this entire season. Before we dive into that, we're going to have so much fun on this. Have an outlook towards the Big 12 as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Parker, Houston made it all the way to the national championship game, just fell to Florida. It was an epic game. The tournament last year was so much fun. Take me through that and just get a nice little snapshot for one more time before the season starts today.
Oh, you're making me relive that last 65 seconds. No, so what I will say, Houston held a lead throughout most of that game, and then had 3 turnovers in the last 4 possessions and a missed shot on the 4th. And the missed shot, for the folks that weren't watching, was not the final possession. They actually turned it over the final possession. It was an ugly last 65 seconds. I say that they were that close to a national title a year ago, and this year they returned 3 starters off that group. Really 4 of their first 8 in the rotation last year are back, and they also bring in, at one point it was ranked, some people reclassified, so stuff got moved around, but at one point it was ranked as the #1 class in America worth of freshmen, and so they obviously have eyes set pretty high, but that does not mean that when they unroll the Final Four banner Monday night at the Lehigh game, and obviously there's a little bit of bittersweet. It very easily 65 seconds shorter, 65 seconds longer in that basketball game could have made it a national championship banner. And so we're still elusively looking out for the elusive national championship after a 7th Final Four for the University of Houston.
I mean, the Final Four is still impressive. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's almost, just almost 65 seconds short to a national championship. That's something that Kansas State, of course, can't say. So let's talk about the good things. 19-1 in conference last year, 35-5 overall. You win the regular season Big 12. You win the Big 12 tournament. How are you feeling about, more on the Houston side, because we're going to dig into the Big 12 as an outlook later on in the show. How are you feeling about a potential repeat? And do you think it might be tougher this year compared to how the Big 12 looks in years past?
Big 12 is fascinating to me this year for Houston because they've got a combination of this star-studded freshman group and the returning veterans. And honestly, Houston and KELVIN Sampson, they just didn't hit the transfer portal in the same kind of way this year. They initially did when they thought MILOS UZAN was going to go to the pros. Barnum pops Isaacs to replace him at the point guard spot. UZAN backed out of the pros. Isaacs went to A&M. So it didn't really amount to anything. But with Houston's roster, you kind of have the returning veteran leadership and the freshman phenoms. CENAC will start. Kingston Fleming started in the scrimmages. He was Gatorade Player of the Year kind of runner-up kind of guy in Texas, top 20 in his class. All 3 of these guys have top 20 in their class. All that is circling around the idea that Houston, I think, has good reason to feel like they should repeat as Big 12 champs. I don't know if it'll be quite as easy. Last year they went 19-1, like you mentioned. They did have a last-minute miraculous victory at Kansas, a weird last-minute victory at UCF, and some of those things, how many times can you roll the dice and win a 50-50 game? Houston wins more of those than they don't. So I think they'll tell you it happens more often than not. But those games, I mean, a hair splits here, a hair splits there, and things just don't shake out for you. And so I think that they're feeling good about it. But I was going to say they're not going to win 19 games, but there also aren't 19 conference games anymore. So, of course, they're not going to win 19 games, Parker. But I think they feel pretty good going into the season based on the last year's results and who they brought back.
Yeah, and if it's one of those models, of course, you can always bring up this nice saying that I always like to use here, that if it's not broke, don't fix it. Do you think the identity for Houston is going to be about the same as we saw last year, where it's you're lucky, you're happy if you're the opponent and you're scoring more than 60 points per game. They only allowed, I think, 58 all season on average, and they didn't score super high, only getting about 70, 71. I think 73 actually was their average on the season. They're going to rely more on the defensive side again. Do you think that's the identity yet again for the Houston Cougars?
Yeah, and it's going to be bringing in new faces and bodies too. You got to work them into the culture. Sampson's big on the word culture. It's on all the T-shirts and stuff like that. And everyone does that. But he's always preached that like your culture is your standards. And you mentioned Houston was 35-5 last year, and how great they were. I don't think people always remember that they were also 4-3 at Thanksgiving last year, right? And
Good
so I
point.
mean, they went the entire rest of the year with just 2 losses, but they also had the growing pains early on, and integrating 3 freshmen into this roster, 2 of which will probably start, uh, kind of alludes to there will be some of those growing pains. Last year, it was replacing Jamal Shed with MILOS UZAN, who missed some of the preseason stuff with a broken nose. So this year is going to be working in Kingston, FLEMINGS, CHRIS RAUH, Isaiah Harwell, even playing some of those sophomore type guys, Mercy Mill, I guess redshirt freshman, Chase McCarty, working them in more often will be challenging. And then, JoJo Tugler missed part of the offseason when he had to have surgery in May. So he missed the first couple months there. So all that kind of stuff adds up to say that I would not be surprised if they were, with a challenging non-conference schedule, had 3 or 4 losses on their schedule, on their resume in December, but were playing better basketball in January and February as they got ready for March. I think that's kind of been the proven formula for Sampson. It was a little bit more dramatic in the American Athletic Conference because you kind of couldn't stand a bunch of losses as an American Athletic Conference team, whereas at the Big 12, they kind of assume you're going to take some lumps in a different kind of way. So I come around full circle, I guess, to say that I feel pretty strongly, even if in a month we're talking about the world burning down and have 3 losses in November.
Your non-conference does look tough. A couple SEC teams with numbers next to them right now, and you're looking at it from the get-go before we even get any kind of basketball that does begin right now. When you're listening to this, there's probably already been basketball. It starts at 8 a.m. Eastern time. The marathon starts all over college basketball across the nation. To start off, you get to play on Monday. Kansas State doesn't play till Tuesday, but Lehigh, you take on them 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time on CBS Sports Network. Quickly, what would you think about them opening up? How you feel about them as an opening opponent when you let down the Final Four banner?
The Patriot League is interesting. It's always like well-coached, disciplined basketball, and Lehigh is kind of going through a little bit of their own rebuild. We previewed it a little bit at Locked on Coogs, but they're um, a very middle of the road Patriot League team the last couple of years. But was that in 2022? They were, 23. They were pretty strong in the Patriot League. And so you just don't know what you're going to get. I think the deal you will see though in that is it's going to be a lot of upperclassmen. And that typically means guys that have played enough basketball to not make mistakes out the gate in the first game. We just mentioned Houston's going to play a lot of freshmen. It also would be very normal for those freshmen to be looking towards November 16th and playing Auburn and Birmingham, or something towards that end. And so you hope you can keep eyes on the prize and stay focused. I trust Sampson to do that, but I think that is a big challenge in the first couple of weeks here.
Yeah, big non-conference games that I see for Houston. Just looking at the schedule, you mentioned November 16th against Auburn. They're starting off preseason ranked number 20 in the country. Around Thanksgiving, 11:25, you're playing Tennessee. You got Florida State right after that on December 6th, and then Arkansas on December 20th. That one's on CBS. You open up Big 12 play at Cincinnati on the 3rd of January. That one's on Fox, and of course, your most important game of the season is on February 14th, Valentine's Day, when you take on Jerome Tang and Kansas State on Peacock. I mean, that's going to be absolutely nuts. Everybody's going to have must-watch TV for that matchup. Final thoughts here on Houston. If you had to put one major bold prediction before the season even started, I'm going to throw you right there. I'm going to put you right out there. Can they get back to the Final Four this season?
Yeah, and I think they win it. And I know that I sound like the homer or whatever that hosts Locked on Cougs saying Houston's going to win it all. I think the experience for those 3 starters of getting so close a year ago is going to serve them well. I also think that, the injection of young talent is a big deal, because while I love Jawan Roberts and I love LJ Cryer and the things they did for Houston were so spectacular, the guys I'm talking about right now are like one and dones or future NBA players, and they're just a little bit younger. And so I think that oddly, Houston was 65 seconds away from a national title and managed to get, in terms of talent, better experience. All that will weigh into, but I think Houston cuts down nets in early April, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it. A Big 12 national champion. That could be fun. Well, on the flip side, Kansas State is just trying to get back to the dance, something that Jerome Tang hasn't done for a couple of years now. This new transfer portal class, the way he's built this new roster, gives you a lot of stuff to be excited about. We're going to talk about that next on this Locked On College crossover of Locked On Cougs and Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On College Crossover is brought to you by Game Time. College football is back and college basketball is back. And really, we couldn't be more excited with the tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stand. Of course, that nice game on February 14th between these two foes. There's nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself, with endless queues, hidden fees, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why I know Parker and definitely me use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. It's what you see is what you pay, and that's all you can really ask for. No hidden fees. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. So check out Game Time today. Take the guesswork out of buying college football and college basketball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. We can talk about the Houston Cougars for probably for 30 minutes if you want to, Parker, but I think we need to change sides here and talk about Jerome Tang and talk about Kansas State, because this team's exciting. I have a lot of optimistic feels about Kansas State this year. They looked okay in exhibition on the offensive side. They're going to score a lot of points. That's something that we haven't seen from Jerome Tang for a very long time, maybe ever, as the head coach of Kansas State. And for the first time ever, maybe the defense is the thing that lags. But I think the offense is some exciting stuff, and it's led by All-American PJ Haggerty coming over from Memphis. You got to see PJ Haggerty, of course, watching college basketball last year. They made it to the NCAA tournament. He's got tournament experience. What do you think about this guy coming over to Kansas State?
Well, and Haggerty also is a guy that obviously has very close connection to the city of Houston, and so I think people that listen to Locked On Coogs or Houstonians, he's from Crosby, right? So they'll know him fairly well. He started off at TCU, has bounced around some, found a home at Memphis, and is back in the Big 12 now. And I guess my question for you is, I mean this the most positive way possible. Kids get to grow up, right? Like they get a chance to grow up. I would almost argue that there were times in his TCU and Tulsa stint certainly where like he didn't seem like the most mature player on the floor. And then Memphis, like, okay, this guy is the leader out there, right? He looks like the all-everything prospect he was at high school. After watching some exhibitions, do you feel more like you're getting that guy, even though now it's Big 12 basketball, not Memphis basketball?
I'll even add more to that and say after watching exhibitions and seeing him at media day and seeing, just some of the conversations that he's had after these exhibition games, I think he's a true leader. I think he's really focusing hard and honing in on his skills to not only try to improve them for an NBA draft stock level, but I think he's also focusing on the off the court intangibles, if you will, with leadership and communication and everything, you name it. He has seemed so far very well polished and very professional in everything he does. So I think that those Tulsa, those TCU things, because those were concerns, don't get me wrong, if you know about the full journey of PJ Haggerty, I think they're in this rearview mirror. And I think for the best part, and that is a very good news for Kansas State, because drama is very easily leaks into this program. We saw it last year with Coleman Hawkins, with the whole tweet debacle, the debacle thing, with what happened with social media and the gambling thing. Doug McDaniel and Jerome Tang didn't have the best relationship, so they decided to trade him to Memphis for PJ Haggerty. That's funny. That's not how it actually happened, but they're now in different schools. And then, of course, kicking players off the team. Achor was dismissed from the school, and that's the second player in back-to-back years that a player was removed from a roster. So, one, trying to find them a nice balance and a good culture, and not having this type of, dare I say, negative energy, something that doesn't look like we have based off these last 2 exhibition games. I think having a leader like PJ Haggerty, who's trying to get himself ready for the NBA, he's trying to do that and hopefully get Kansas State back to the dance as well, will help that resume for sure. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that, PJ Haggerty is going to be a huge leader, and I do think that's in the rearview mirror.
Well, and I'm happy for him. And he Crosby, Texas kid. Another weird Houston tie, as far as city of Houston goes, for this program at Kansas State is Jerome Tang. Spent 10 years coaching at Heritage Christian, Greater Houston area. Before, everyone thinks him as Baylor assistant for Scott Drew, but before that, right, he was a high school coach in the Greater Houston area at a little private school. And I want to ask, mostly because I like the guy. He was Naismith Coach of the Year in 2023, and it felt like things were riding high. Get NIL money invested in him after that. It's like things should only get better. And honestly, from afar, Christian, I feel like he looks like he's on the hot seat. Does he have to make the dance? Am I crazy for thinking that a guy that won Coach of the Year 2 years ago is sitting here in the hot seat in 2025-6?
I don't think it's unfair at all. And I don't think it's wild for you to think that. I do think his buyout's pretty large. And I think that is a main reason why I don't know if I will necessarily immediately say that he is on the hot seat. But we've seen some crazy stuff happen this year alone in college football, right? With the amount of coaches being fired and buyouts not being a concern no matter what. I can see that translating and dripping into college basketball a little bit. This is the first year we're getting college basketball after the rev share. So maybe we are going to see some different things, and maybe buyout doesn't matter. I think there's a concern. I'd say the seat is warm if I had to just put maybe a temperature on it right now, Parker, because you haven't made the dance in a few years. And really only after that nice Elite Eight run you had at the beginning of your tenure is the only thing you can hang your hat on. Now, that's a hell of a thing to hang your hat on. But after being one of the top portal classes last year, and then the team falls flat, obviously the behind the scenes issues that have seemed to always been happening. And then you kind of go back to the well yet again, and you build this roster completely different where you focus on offense. You bring in another head coach to be an assistant in Matthew Driscoll, who has great offensive prowess, if you will. Yeah, I don't think it would probably be dumb of me not to say that there's a chance that maybe Jerome Tang is on the hot seat. I do think that's the case. What I will be concerned about is that if they have a slow start to this non-conference, something that was a huge issue last year, they started off very slow in non-conference. And by the time they got to Big 12 play, it felt like they were already out of it, even with the peaks and valleys of Big 12 play that they actually had. So they have, in my opinion, a manageable non-conference schedule. They start off with UNC Greensboro. They play on Tuesday. They don't get to play today as Houston gets to. They play Tuesday at 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus against UNCG. Then they have a couple other big games coming up later on, like they have Cal, they have Mississippi State. Indiana is their first true road test. That'll be a very tough game. That'll definitely decide and give you a good taste of what Kansas State could be this season. And then later on, they play Creighton, who's currently ranked 23rd in the preseason AP poll. I know Houston played Mississippi State in an exhibition. That's probably one of their first true tests. What'd you see about Mississippi State?
They have a guard by the name of Hubbard that can, he does Josh Hubbard, and he'll legitimately be pushing for 20 points per game this year. They run a lot of things through him, and frankly, it'll be interesting to me. Y'all have a very talented young guard yourselves, the Castillo kid. How does that matchup play out? And so I guess that kind of segues me into my final question on Kansas State. We know Haggerty. Castillo is a highly ranked recruit, so it may be him. But who's the other name on the everyone knows Jerome Tang. Who's the other name on the roster that Houston Cougar fans or other Big 12 basketball fans are going to know by the end of the year?
David Castillo would be a fun name. And if David Castillo is the name, I think that would be huge things for Jerome Tang for recruiting and for a lot of other things. But if I had to put a name down, I think Nate Johnson is the answer. He was the MAC Player of the Year last year when he was with Akron. He was the MAC Defensive Player of the Year as well. The only other player that did that, or he's the last player to do it since Bonzi Wells. Right. So like that's a name from the past right there. But yeah, I mean, I do think he's probably the 1-2 punch with PJ Haggerty. Abdi Bashir, I think, is going to be a fun player to watch as well. He's a shooter. He's not afraid to shoot. It just depends if he shoots either 34% from behind the line or 40%. If he shoots 40% aroundish from behind the line with the amount of three-pointers that he's probably going to shoot in this game, he could easily find himself top 25 scoring in the country. Like, that's how wild the amount of shooting is there. So, yeah, I'd have to go Nate Johnson or Abdi Bashir. But if it's a guy like David Castillo, if it's a guy like Moby Ike Karuke, one of those two guys that step up that are with Kansas State last year, that would be a huge win for fans and I think for recruiting for Jerome Tang. I think they can get back to the dance. I think this is the year they can find themselves back in March Madness. I think the Big 12 is very tough. Don't get me wrong, but I think they can fight. Let's remember, they might have went 16 and 17 last year, but they went 9 and 11 in Big 12 play. They were right in the middle of the pack. I think if they had a better non-conference, even with a 9 and 11 play, I think they could have found themselves in the tournament. I mean, Baylor made the tournament. They were 10 and 10. They just had one win more than Kansas State did. They just had a better non-conference slate. So if they can find themselves around 500 in the Big 12, which might be the toughest basketball conference in the country this year, and then have a really much better non-conference play, I think you can find Kansas State as a team in the tournament, even if it is a first 4 game. I'll take that. I'll take a game in Dayton. That means you're in the dance, Parker.
I want to agree with you, though. Well, I don't know if I count Dayton. I still have trouble doing that mentally, but I guess you're right. I do want to agree with you about the Big 12 being back on top in basketball, and I guess that's kind of where we're going to wrap up here, is head that direction.
Yeah, we definitely should. BYU is the opening game for Kansas State, and that's probably who we should talk about first in the Big 12 outlook, because they might be the team that gives you the hardest time this next season coming up here. We'll do that next on this Locked On College Crossover. But first, the NBA is back. Not just college basketball, the NBA as well. And there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game and want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything who will score to next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. We're talking Big 12 outlook. We're talking Houston. We're talking Kansas State. Big 12 regular season champions for Houston, plus 145. You can still get plus odds for Houston. I mean, that's going to tell you just how tough this Big 12 is. And if you're thinking there's a chance for Kansas State to win the whole Big 12, you think that not only just make the dance, they're going to win the whole Big 12, well, plus 6,500 odds is your bet there. I mean, why not, right? Why not? That's what I said. So check it out with FanDuel today, because right now FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. The Big 12 is going to be wild in college basketball this year. I think it's going to be the toughest and deepest conference in America when it comes to college basketball. I truly do. I don't think that's a Big 12 bias thing on this show. When you look at some of these teams, when you look at the preseason polls of where teams were put, I think that there are 9, potentially 10 teams that can find themselves in the NCAA tournament for the Big 12. I don't think you get that many, but I think there are a potential for that many teams to fight for a chance to either be on the bubble or actually be in when it's all said and done. I think it starts with the Houston Cougars as we talk on this Locked On College Crossover. Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Coogs. I'm Christian Rauh of Locked On Kansas State. And it could end with Kansas State find themselves on a bubble team. But there's, of course, probably about a good 7 or 8 teams in between. At least that's what the preseason poll says for the Big 12 media poll. Let's start with BYU, because that is the team that probably is the most interesting, I would say, heading into the new season. You know what Houston is, at least you have an idea, but BYU definitely changed their identity without question this year, and they brought in some studs. And I think they might be one of the wild cards inside the conference this year, Parker.
Yeah, FanDuel's got them at the second best odds to win the conference, and they're actually in – the Big 12 has 6 teams in the top 18 teams to win it all on FanDuel as well. So I don't think we're off on that. But BYU, Houston heads there in early February. It's a Saturday game. I'm sure it'll be put on Saturday night primetime by the time we get there. But BYU starts out the year in the preseason top 10. And with Tech being back in the top 10 in football, they may both be actually schools that are in the top 10 in both men's basketball and football, which tells you about the kind of years the other Cougars and Red Raiders are having. But BYU did this thing where they went out and got, for all intents and purposes to me, Baylor's best returning player, and I'm right. And then they went and got the best freshman in the country in AJ DeBonsa. And generally speaking, that works out pretty well. I think the attraction there is this coach that has ties to the NBA game. Kevin Young, he comes in after having been at with the Phoenix Suns for a minute. And I really, if you look at them, I do think they're really strong. A year ago, I kind of questioned if they could defend anybody, and Houston managed to just kind of run them at the gym in a we're going to defend you and you're not going to defend us kind of a matchup. This year, I'm sure. I mean, Kevin Young talked at media days about toughness, but you see it too. I think that like they just had to fix the defensive problems by getting better players. That's simple.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. And I think they did that. I think they improved their roster, and they were already a pretty good team. I mean, 14-6 in the conference last year, 26-10. I think they could maybe flirt with close to 30 wins this year if everything goes right, if they stay healthy. I think they could find them maybe around the same kind of mark as where Texas Tech was, going 28-9. Would that surprise you if you found them around that same mark as where Texas Tech was last year?
No, and I think Tech will be up there again as well too. And I don't know if you meant to segue there or not, but Tech probably has the guy that's certainly on FanDuel, but and anyone listening to this is the favorite twin player of the year in the conference, JT Toppin. Kind of was surprised he came back for another year at Tech as opposed to going to the pros. But between NIL and he's like kind of in between positions at the next level, it just probably financially made more sense in the modern world, as weird as that is to say, to go back to Lubbock. I think the world of McCaslin. Well, while I may have sounded critical a second ago on Kevin Young, I think the world of that McCaslin guy as a coach. That dude has already built a very strong program there in Lubbock, and they've got an identity and its toughness. And well, I think Houston. Obviously, I'm going to tell you later this year why Houston wins those games. That's a very strong program for sure.
No, I'm with you. One more school that we probably should talk about, probably not going to be in favor of my K-State fans here, but Kansas didn't have the greatest year last year, going 11-9 in conference, 21-13. That's not the normal kind of Kansas that you're used to for the basketball school and the Jayhawks. Not a football school. Sunflower Showdown. Scap a couple weeks ago, just to remind you on that one. Had to get my licks in any way I can. But the roster looks good. And speaking of young freshmen, they got a pretty good stud in themselves as well.
Yeah, obviously everyone's going to talk about Darren Peterson and the phenomenal guard that kid is, reclassified and all of those kinds of things. But he's a true one and done guard, and it almost stinks for us that only get to watch him a couple times a year because we only get to play against him a couple times a year. But the kid's really special. I was surprised he listed at 6'5", and he was at media day. And he's every bit of 6'5", Christian. I really thought that was going to be one of those things where like high school says 6'5", he's really 6'3". Like he's really on the closer to 6'6" kind of realm. Long arms, athletic built kid, very mature speaker, impressive. And Kelvin Sampson said something at media day that I want to throw your way, because he said even after a year or two down, that's really just the way that basketball and college sports are going to work in the modern era, that Kansas is still the bell cow. And everyone ran with that because the guy that just won the conference 2 years in a row is sitting here saying someone else is the bell cow. But they're your cross-state rival as Locked On Kansas State. You hear that. Do you think there's validity to that, or things changed?
No, I think there's validity to it. I'm not going to lie. I want to be transparent about it. I mean, yeah, I think Kansas definitely went back to the well. They added some stuff. And even though there was a couple down years, I don't think they're going to give up on it. And you got to remember, Kansas just brought in a lot of more money, $300 million coming into the program as well. I don't think they're going to slow down anytime recruiting. They're always going to focus on basketball. So yeah, I don't know if I want to give them the definition. I don't want to give them the title of bell cow. I just don't know if I can personally do that with my bias, but I think they will always be seen as a contender for this conference. And I think that's really fair to say for sure. I think we'll find them back in the top 3 or 4, potentially at worst top 5 in the conference when it's all said and done come March. And we'll see them probably make a good run in the March Madness tournament. Before I let you go here, Parker Ainsworth here on Locked On College Crossover, from the top looking down, from Houston Cougars, who won the Big 12 last year. Go below Kansas State. And when it comes to conference of the conference Big 12 here of how they lined up last season. You know, Kansas State going 9-11. We think that I personally think they can make it to the dance. Who's a team that you could see as maybe being the biggest sleeper, not to win the conference, because, you know, there's a lot of heavy hitters in this league, but what's a sleeper of a team that could find themselves in March Madness this season that maybe no one's paying attention to?
So I tend to think and fall back to coaches when I think of that, for better or worse. And that leads me to TCU and Jamie Dixon. He's had some good years at TCU. Just 2 years ago, they won over 20. They won 20 games 3 years in a row. That just ended 2 years ago. Last year they were exactly 500. I want to pull up to make sure I was right on that. I kind of think they're back to the tournament after a year off. Dixon seems like to me like kind of get them right back in action there. I don't think it happens this year at Oklahoma State. But a guy I think we all need to be on the lookout for is that Steve Lutz guy at Oklahoma State. He was good at Western Kentucky, Christian.
He was.
It's hard to build a program there. And I'd also point out, as a guy that he went to Texas A&M Corpus Christi, he knows how to recruit this area of the world. That could be dangerous in a couple of years at Oklahoma State. Maybe not this year, but one day very soon.
Oklahoma State was my sleeper pick. You stole that from me with Steve Lutz. I think I saw them play an exhibition against Auburn. They looked okay. And I think they might shock a few people. I don't know if they get in the tournament, but I think we might see their name on the list all the way to like the final days on first four in, first four out kind of conversation. I think we continue to see the Cowboys names. That's where I'm going as a sleeper on that one. Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Cougs. Where can everyone find you over on your show?
Locked On Cougs Daily Podcast, all things Houston Cougars, wherever you get your podcasts, free and available, much like my folks over at Kansas State, Locked On Kansas State. Christian, what you got going this week?
Man, we got a bye week for football. I think that's a good thing after the loss of Texas Tech. So we're going to focus on basketball real hard. We're still talking about football, but we're going to focus real hard on basketball, men's and women, because the season is finally here. And I'm so excited. This is my second season that I get to cover on basketball for Kansas State, and I couldn't be more excited. All right, folks, please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time on this Locked On College crossover of Locked On Cougs and Locked On Kansas State.